Hello, hi, and welcome once again to the week today. We've been off air for a while, but we're back with a new set, with some new guests and some old guests as well. We shall be discussing a number of issues which we usually do for the next 30 minutes. We shall be looking at the education reform, 2 more British soldiers die in Iraq. We shall be discussing civil liberties and has political correctness gone mad. We shall see what Ken Livingstone should have said. And to discuss these issues with me today, I, as usual, have 3 guests. But also, an addition to this program is, हम ये प्रोग्राम थोड़ा उर्दू में भी करेंगे, तो हम दरख्वास्त करते हैं कि जो हमारे लिसनर्स हैं, इफ़ आप चाहते हैं टेलीफोन कॉल करने के लिए, जी आप उर्दू में भी सवाल कर सकते हैं, हाँ तो हम कोशिश करेंगे कि आपको उर्दू में भी जवाब दें. So that's an extra addition, and please excuse me on my Urdu if I make any mistakes there. So let me start the program now with introducing you to my guests. And first, on my left-hand side, I have Councillor Anne Garnar. Thank you, Anne, for coming to the program.
You're welcome.
Next to Anne, I have Councillor Khalid Hussain. Once again, thank you very much. And on the far right, I'm sure that's not politically associated, is Garnar Shafiq. Mohammed is an activist, especially looking at issues to do with the Muslim community. And I'm sure we will be hearing what he says quite soon. To start off, what's been hot on the agenda today in Prime Minister's question time was the education reform. And what was very interesting to hear was that David Cameron offered great support to the Prime Minister this morning by saying, well, if your own backbenchers won't be enough to support the bill through, then don't worry, the Tories will. Is the gap getting thinner and narrower? I wonder. But sticking to education, before we come on to that, since our programme looks at local issues, national and international, I'm going to focus today here in Manchester, where the programme is being broadcasted from. In Prestwich, north of Manchester, there are 2 issues that are affecting the local community. One is to do with the Heaton Park, which people know very well, and apparently there is some potential construction that's going to take place there. And the second item will be to do with, again, a school in Prestwich, which is looking at potential closure. To start off with, I will first turn to Anne, and I would like to ask her, what is the situation with Heaton Park, which I know lots of local residents are concerned with. So Anne, what's happening with the Heaton Park? I mean, I hear that there is going to be some sort of development and construction that's going to take place, and this is sort of a green belt area. A lot of residents have issues and concerns. I mean, if you can fill the viewers in with this, please.
We've been having literally hundreds and hundreds of calls, of emails. We've set up a website. We've got a residents association, very heavily involved as an action group. People are really, really bothered that a very large primary school will be built in the park to replace some buildings that have been there a long time, and people can say, well, you know, they're old buildings, it's time they were replaced, but what's proposed, this development is going to be very, very big and will have a huge impact on this very historic park. The Historic Garden Society are against it, the Heaton Park Trust are against it.
What's the local council saying about this? I mean, are they against, are they for it?
Manchester City Council have passed through their executive agreement for plans to be drawn up for a consultation based on drawings and architects' plans.
But can I ask you, what's actually wrong with development? I mean, Manchester is a growing city, it's a developing city, and investment is welcome, development is welcome. What's so drastically wrong, and how does the local community feel about it?
I think everybody's bothered that once you start selling off a little bit of a park, or selling off or using it as a building plot, I mean, are all our parks at risk? I mean, are all our parks going to be built on? We live in a big, pressured society. We need our own spaces. And Heaton Park's really special. It's the one place where everybody from different communities can mix together. People mix together there and the children play in the playground from many different communities. When outside of the park, they go to their own shops, their own schools, and they're separated, and it's one free place. I mean, parks just aren't free building plots.
So what have you done to stop this happening?
We've had posters on bins. So on bin day, the posters are out on the road, which attracted a lot of attention. We made a huge Christmas card, a season's greetings card to the Lord Mayor of Manchester, and we got 750 signatures in a week.
That's quite a lot of signatures.
Yeah.
I mean, I know Khalid is part of your area as well. Do you have an opinion on this?
Well, Qassim, thank you very much, first of all, for inviting me on your show. It's always a pleasure to come on to your show. One thing I must say is that Heaton Park, I've always described it as disputed territory, because you referred to it as Manchester, whereas we in the Metropolitan Borough of Bury would like to think of it as Bury territory. So anyhow, it is disputed.
But I think the council tax is for Manchester, actually.
Well, it depends on which side of Heaton Park you live on. But one thing I would say is that, yes, I would agree with my colleague, Councillor Ann Garnar, in the sense that if you begin to encroach on an area of a park, don't forget the Heaton Park was actually donated to the people of Prestwich.
That's right.
And to the people of Manchester. So, you know, this land actually wasn't initially owned by neither Bury nor by Manchester. It was donated, and therefore encroaching that land, building schools or anything else on it, you know, can be dangerous for the long term. But the point that I wanted to make was that, you see, in Prestwich there are other changes that are taking place with the proposed closure of the Prestwich Arts College. That's which again, the reasoning that has been put forward in terms of closing Prestwich Arts College is totally nonsensical. You know, it is totally irrational, and I, as a Conservative, and my group, and I'm sure that Councillor Ann Garnar and her group are also united in this viewpoint that we're actually against any closure of any school in the Metropolitan Borough of Bury, or indeed anywhere else.
But on that point, you're saying that the Conservative Party are in favour of keeping it open, from what I pick up from you, but I've had calls from a number of residents who have children at the school and are very, very concerned. I believe that there was quite a large meeting within the town hall, where there was a huge protest
yesterday,
and I was led to believe, and the residents were led to believe, that the protest had made an impact and the school would not be closed down. Maybe, Anne, if you could shed some light on that.
There was an initial proposal, and it wasn't particularly well put together. The statistics were, everything was looked at to do with buildings and the statistics rather than aspects of community cohesion.
Yes.
If you look at the reports out of the riots in Burnley and Oldham, the reports that and the community cohesion report from the government, that actually said that you must look at your schools. You must be very careful that you create cohesive community schools where everybody is feeling safe and they feel like they're having a good education. And the schools that are going to close in Bury, Prestwich Arts College has won an award for community cohesion. Absolutely. In 2004, they were actually recommended for a regional award. That award they presented back to the council last night and said, well, thank you, but no thank you.
Can I just come back to Khalid on that point? Khalid, I mean, I hear that what you're saying is that the Conservative Party, like the Liberal Democrats, are indicating that schools should not be closed down. But I was led to believe that the Conservative Party, until yesterday, was actually in support of closing it down, and they actually agreed with the Labour Council move on this, that the school should be closed down, and the protest that took place was against the school being closed down. I mean, if you could shed some light on that. I mean, obviously there's been a
first of all,
a step back there by the sounds of it.
Qassim, there are two main points that I want to make. First of all, that actually very little detailed information has been given to any of the political groups, particularly the Liberal Democrats and the Conservatives. The second thing is that the consultation process, the so-called consultation process that has taken place, has not been very comprehensive. So piecemeal information has been given to the two opposition parties. But in principle, the Conservative group on Bury Council, we are against the closure of any school. And if you look at in my ward, the Derby High School, the school that I went to, where I did my O-levels all those years ago, that is now up for closure. You know, or perhaps merger with Broadock High School, and perhaps you know, the school may be rebuilt on a neutral site. The issue here is that you're going to be displacing more than 400. Well, if you combine it with Broadock High School, you know, 600-700 children are going to be, you know, relocated elsewhere.
No, but I understand
and displaced.
The point I'm trying to get out of you, Khalid, is that why the change of mind? I mean, what I understood was, I mean, can you please confirm first that was your party, the Tory party, always in favour of keeping it open, or has this been a change of mind suddenly? And if so, why?
No, we were keeping an open mind in terms of what was actually on offer.
Well, no, can I just stop you there? You said open mind. The information that I received was that the Tory party, like Labour, wanted to close the school down. If you can clarify that, Qassim, I'd be very grateful.
First of all, let me just tell you straight away, in no uncertain terms, the Conservative Party is against the closure of any school or indeed a hospital.
Well, that's now,
in Bury.
Yesterday.
We have never been in favour, because don't forget, as an opposition group, we cannot make the decision. The decision is made by the ruling group.
But you have an opinion.
We have an opinion, and our opinion
you have a policy.
We have been totally committed.
You're not actually answering my question. I'm sorry, I'm stressing on this point, right? Is that I'm asking you, did the Tory party change their mind, or were they originally in favour of closing the school down, and if so, why?
The Conservative Party have never been in favour of closing the school down.
Obviously, you're not answering my question. I come back to Anne. Anne, I mean, maybe could you shed some light on that? Were the Tory party in favour of closing it or not?
There was a report at the executive a couple of months ago, and Bob Bibby, who is the leader of the Conservative councillors, voted for the school closure consultation programme. And in voting in favour of that means you are voting in favour of consulting to close schools.
Right, so here we have that there has been a change of mind anyway, which I'd just like to come back to views. नाज़रीन, if आप ये प्रोग्राम देख रहे हैं तो जो उस इलाके में रहते हैं और जिनके बच्चे उन स्कूलों में जाते हैं, प्रेसविट स्कूल में, if आप फ़ोन कॉल करना चाहते हैं, हमें अपना व्यू इस पे सुनाना चाहते हैं कि आप स्कूल को बंद करना चाहिए या नहीं, ये प्रेसविट हाई स्कूल है मैनचेस्टर में, तो प्लीज़ गिव us a call if you think you want to comment on that. We have united feelings here now that both the Tory party and the Liberal Democrats don't want to close the school and are campaigning against the closure of the school, whilst I believe that local council still is moving towards closing the school down and may still be closed down. So we'll move on from there. The other issue I'd like to discuss is the education reform, and in today's Prime Minister's question time, it was very interesting that the Tory party and the Labour Party are so close to each other here that David Cameron said to Prime Minister Blair that he said, look, if you haven't got enough support from the backbenchers to get the education reform forward, the Tories will help them. He said, we've got 200 Tories who would support the bill through, which I'm sure Blair was very happy about. If I could just comment on that, if you could comment on that, Simon. Simon, if you could comment on that, Khalid.
Wishful thinking.
Yes.
The thing is, I mean, it's this whole, the white paper and the Prime Minister's mission, you can call it, for education reform is highly embarrassing. It's proving highly embarrassing for Tony Blair and his cabinet, because he is going to rely upon the support of the opposition to get his bill through, which actually basically shows that he is a lame duck Prime Minister. But the thing is, we have under David Cameron and under Michael Howard and before that, we have always said that where the government puts forward certain policies, certain strategies, if it is in line with our manifesto, it is in line with Conservative thinking, that in principle we'll back that. At the moment, very little information has been brought forward in terms of what the education reform is going to look like.
And yet you're still going to go and back it?
No.
Well, that's a bit strange. You haven't got the full information to back it. Well, let me just move on to Mohammed Shafiq here. Mohammed Shafiq.
I think what is interesting to look at these proposals are the very people who are going to suffer as a result of the stitch-up from the Conservatives and the Labour Party on this are ethnic minorities predominantly and people living in working class areas up and down the country. What you're going to find is that the top schools that are performing well will be able to have the freedom to go ahead and to get their own budget, to get their own staff and their own curriculum and move forward. And the poorer schools in predominantly poorer areas would be left behind. So I sadly believe is going to get a two-stage, two-tier education system, where those that are fortunate enough to live in particular postcodes will move forward, and the rest of them would feel backwards.
So it's selection through the back door.
Absolutely, then, and I think the Conservatives are making a serious mistake.
Yes.
If they think by backing the government is going to show that they're responsible, it's going to show that they're irresponsible for the needs of ethnic minorities and Muslims up and down the country.
Right, Mohammed. I think we've got a caller on the line. Is it Mr. Raja? from Bury. If you're on the line, please come on.
अस्सलामुअलैकुम जनाब कासिम भाई।
वालेकुम सलाम जी, कैसे हैं आप? ठीक है,
मैं तारिक महमूद बोल रहा हूँ जनाब।
तारिक साहब कैसे हैं आप? ठीक हैं, बहुत खुशी है आप हमारे प्रोग्राम को भी देख रहे हैं और आप सवाल भी इंशाल्लाह करना चाह रहे हैं।
इंटरेस्ट लेकर देख रहा हूँ जी, ये हमारे लिए तो बहुत जरूरी प्रोग्राम है।
अच्छा।
क्योंकि हम बरी के रहने वाले हैं।
हाँ जी।
और हमारे काउंसलर खालिद साहब भी उधर तशरीफ रखे हुए हैं। तो सबसे पहले जनाब मेरी ये रिक्वेस्ट है काउंसलर खालिद भाई से और दूसरे काउंसलर हजरात से भी कि देखें भाई, हमारे जो ब्रोडक हाई स्कूल का मसला चल रहा है क्लोजिंग डाउन का, ये हमारे लिए बहुत ज़रूरी मसला है और हमारे बच्चों के लिए बहुत ज़रूरी है, क्योंकि हमारे बच्चों का आगे GCSE में बहुत सा नुकसान होगा। दे बी अ बिग लॉस फॉर आवर चिल्ड्रंस। They're going to lose their education from the Brodock High School. So my request is to all the councillors that please request you that the school shouldn't be closed, and these they will be a big loss for the all community people, children's.
Right, thank you very much.
We have a large number of Asian children goes to the Brodock High School, and especially Councillor Khalid Hussain is from the Red Wales ward, and quite a few numbers of children from Red Wales ward goes to the Brodock High School.
Right.
Well, we are not in the favor of closing down the schools.
Right, so if I can now pose that question to our panel today. So Khalid, I mean, Mr. Tariq mentioned you quite significantly there. They are not in favour of having the school closed down.
Absolutely. I mean, as Raja Tariq Mahmood rightly said, a lot of parents from my ward actually send their children to Brodock High School, and it is a very good school, particularly when it comes to its community links. It's very much a community school. After school hours, the community utilises a school in many different ways for sporting activities, social events and so on, even on the weekends. So closing a central school like Broadhook, in my opinion, is completely nonsensical. You know, the arguments that have been put forward, which are falling roll numbers, this argument doesn't stack up with me, because when you try and find nursery places in East Ward, in the vicinity of Broadhook, you can't find nursery places. You know, places in primary schools are so scarce. So I don't understand where this argument is coming from. That in the next 10 years' time,
isn't that Khalid in a general contradiction then, isn't it? Based on if Cameron's backing the government on this education reform, which many people believe that would cause a sort of a backdoor entrance, as Mohammed Shafiq said. I mean, surely we do have
the proposed closure of the Derby High School and the Broadhook High School, or perhaps its merger, or even the closure of the Prestwich Arts College. This has actually nothing to do with what David Cameron was saying in the House of Commons. It has nothing to do with that. This is happening now. Bury Council, you know, the ruling group is proposing the closure of Derby High School and Broadhook High School and Prestwich Arts College, or perhaps the possible merger of Derby High School and Broadhook High School. Okay. I am on record, even for the Prestwich Arts College, I am on record that I am very much against the closure of any school.
If I can just stop you there, quite a bit on, just and maybe a final word on the school, and what are you going to do to try to keep it open?
There's a rally in Bury, a meeting at 1 o'clock, a huge rally, and we're asking people to come in a peaceful protest.
When's the rally?
This Saturday.
What time?
At 1 o'clock from the centre of Bury near the town hall.
Right.
And it is a totally peaceful protest for people to show that they really believe. I mean, I've been working on a project with Broadoak and Parenthorne on a race equality booklet, and the young people have actually written policies that are really needed in schools, and these schools can really make a difference. And to shut them instead of looking at smaller class sizes, it's just stupid.
नाज़रीन, जिनको उर्दू में ज़्यादा समझ आती है कि जो काउंसलर एन ने बोला है कि इस सैटरडे को एक डेमोन्स्ट्रेशन हो रहा है, पीसफुल डेमोन्स्ट्रेशन हो रहा है कि स्कूल खुला रहना चाहिए, और ये टाउन हॉल से शुरू होएगा. तो सॉरी, व्हाट टाइम वाज इट?
It's 1 o'clock.
ये 1 बजे होएगा. तो जो पेरेंट्स के बच्चे हैं स्कूलों में, इफ़ आप चाहते हैं कि आपको हिस्सा लेना चाहिए, तो फिर आप 1 बजे इस मार्च में शिरकत करें, प्लीज़ करें आप. So I'll now move on to the next item on the agenda today. We haven't got much time left over. Is once again the situation of Iraq is as out of control today as it has been from the beginning. 2 more British soldiers have sadly died. Many civilians are dying on a daily basis. The situation is getting from bad to worse and yet we cannot see any positive change taking place. Rather, the question is, when will there be a civil war? Well, I posed to the panel here today, maybe if I start with Mohammed Shafiq, is I think we are in a civil war in Iraq.
I think it's very worrying, it's very concerning, but I think we have to go back to the reason why it's happening. The main reason why it's happening is because Iraq's under illegal occupation. The day the troops leave, we could see some sort of normality. Remember, whatever the wrongs of Saddam Hussein, under Saddam Hussein's rule there wasn't terrorism. Hundreds of thousands of people weren't being killed in the streets of Iraq. So the responsibility for this should rest, I believe, with the Western governments who are occupying Iraq, and secondly, that have encouraged the extremists into the country.
But according to Tony Blair today at Question Time, what he said was that there was terrorism going on before Iraq, and that took place in other parts of the world. There was linkages there between what happened in 9/11. He said very clearly that the reason why they went into war was to prevent any potential terrorism in Europe, in the States, and the same thing happening again. So they're creating a direct link on why they took those actions to go into Iraq.
There is no justification for the illegal occupation of a sovereign country that is not a threat to its neighbours or to Western interest. A country that allegedly possessed weapons of mass destruction. We now know that then weapons of mass destruction didn't exist. We know that we know everything that's happened as a result in the past 2-3 years. The only single person who refuses to accept that he got it wrong is the Prime Minister himself. And the day the Prime Minister accepts that, he loses his whole objectives, his whole bargaining tool for taking this country into war. And the reality is that Iraq will be a safer place when the British government announces a planned withdrawal, and we work towards that, so that the troops, for example, I know some people are saying December this year, so there's a planned withdrawal of foreign troops.
That's not from the government. I mean, the government hasn't indicated that at all.
That's coming from various, the United Nations refugee organisations, development organisations, political parties like the Liberal Democrats, the Green Party, the Respect Party. There's a wide range of British society that are coming together and saying enough's enough. And what's happening in Iraq at the moment, the responsibility does rest with the people who carried out that evil. But at the same time, responsibility rests with Western governments who allow this to happen under their watch.
But the Tories originally supported the invasion of Iraq. And I believe even today that when we talk about withdrawal, Khalid, the Tory party still feel that you can't really give a mandate for withdrawal. And yet what seems to be echoed in this studio and around the country is get our soldiers out of Iraq.
Qassim, first of all, I mean, I'm on record to have been against the illegal war in Iraq from day one. I'm on record. I have always, since day one, I have been against the war in Iraq. In fact, I'm against any illegal war.
But Khalid, it's your party making reference.
What I'm saying is that the decision, when the decision was made on the information that was provided, there was information that was provided was that there was a 45-minute imminent threat. That proved to be false. Secondly, that there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. That proved to be wrong. But at that moment in time, that was the information that was put forward before the cabinet.
I'm sorry, I'm going to have to come back in there. Let's remember that in the run-up to the general election, Michael Howard said that had he had the chance again to have to go back in time prior to the Iraq war, that he would have voted exactly the same way. The Conservatives are hypocrites in this issue. You know, the Liberal Democrats took a position, the Labour Party took a position. It was the Conservatives who tried gaining capital out of the Iraq war. They took a position. Their party, even today, Cameron has refused to accept that the Iraq war was illegal. He's refused to accept it was wrong, and he's continued to support the government on this. So you can't have it both ways. You can't say that the Conservatives were against the war in the beginning. Well, they weren't. Everything their party has done, everything the Labour government has done, has shown the opposite. So I think we want to honestly.
Khalid personally has it on record that he was against war. But Khalid, coming back to your party, I mean, you're here as a councillor, as a Tory party councillor, right? And on the issue of withdrawal, so yet still there's been no movement on the issue of withdrawal. I mean, they are still saying we cannot have a mandate for withdrawal. I mean, again, at least they could put something, what's gone wrong, they could put right.
Yes, Qassim, I personally think that a deadline should be set. A deadline should be set for the withdrawal of British troops, or indeed foreign troops from Iraq. But you've got to look at the situation in Iraq at this moment in time. I mean, it is a totally chaotic situation. You know, I can understand, you know, the arguments that are being put forward in terms of who created the situation in the first place, whether it was Saddam Hussein, whether it was the foreign powers who invaded Iraq. I can listen to all those arguments, but look at the situation on the ground as it is now. It is indeed a very, very serious situation in Iraq. We've seen bombings, we've seen killings. You know,
then why are we not getting
what I'm saying,
some shift from the Tory party here to consider a mandate for withdrawal?
What I'm saying is, at the end of the day, the Conservative Party is in opposition. It is the Labour government. The Labour government makes a decision, Qassim. You know that the decisions in terms of manoeuvring or armed forces, in terms of the negotiations with the USA and other states, those negotiations are undertaken by the Prime Minister and his cabinet.
No, I understand you're in opposition, but yet today Cameron backed the Labour Party.
The Liberal Democrats.
You can't meet it as well.
Let me just. I mean, I didn't want to make too many political points, but see, the Liberal Democrats have always jumped on the bandwagon. They've always said, okay, we've always been against the war in Iraq. In actual fact, Min Campbell is on record to have supported the war in Iraq initially. It's only after, when Charles Kennedy and other colleagues shifted their policy, after they knew what the Labour Party's policy was, that they actually shifted their policy. But the thing is, the hypocritical stance that the Liberal Democrats have taken is that on the one hand they're against the war, but they're in favour of the troops. I just find that totally illogical and hypocritical.
I've got another caller online. I have a Mr. Rahman from Manchester online. Mr. Rahman.
Yes, please.
रहमान साहब, आप उर्दू में बात कर सकते हैं? हाँ जी, फरमाएं। वालेकुम सलाम जी, कैसे हैं आप? ठीक है? बहुत खुशी है आप हमारे प्रोग्राम पे आ रहे हैं।
आपका कैसा हाल है?
दुआ आपकी, अल्हम्दुलिल्लाह खुश हैं। हाँ जी, आप सवाल करना चाहते हैं? आज हमारे जो पैनल में बैठे हुए हैं।
जी, आप इन्होंने बात की थी उसके हवाले से
स्कूल की या पार्क की? हाँ, सदाम की। अच्छा, हाँ जी, इराक की बात।
सदाम हुसैन,
हाँ जी,
ठीक है, उन्होंने अच्छा काम नहीं किया, लेकिन वो अपने मुल्क में रहते हैं, ठीक है?
हाँ जी,
जो अमेरिका ने किया है
जी,
वो ऐसा गलत किया है, जो अवाम को करना चाहिए था वो करना चाहिए था।
अच्छा, आपका मतलब है सदाम हुसैन को अवाम को निकालना चाहिए था और अमेरिका को नहीं?
अवाम को करना चाहिए था
जी,
अमेरिका को नहीं करना चाहिए था।
अच्छा, ठीक। मैं इंग्लिश में इसकी ट्रांसलेट कर दूं। The gentleman, Mr. Rahman, is saying that the Iraqi people should have actually got rid of Saddam Hussein, and it should have been left to the Americans to have to do that. I mean, that is fair comment. But at the time, we know that Saddam was a dictator and had absolute control. Maybe.
I mean, there is. Sorry, Alan. There is that. But the reality is, more than 100,000 innocent people lost their life during the Iraq War, and the only. I mean, I'm not going to get political here, but the only political party that had a consistent, principled stance in the run-up to the war was the Liberal Democrats. It was Liberal Democrats that said, "I'm sorry, but this is wrong. It shouldn't happen. It's an illegal war. It shouldn't happen."
Thank you very much. Sorry, time खत्म हो गया है. बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया आप हमारे प्रोग्राम पे आज questions भी किए हैं. And I'd like to thank all our viewers today. I'd like to thank my guests and Khalid Shafiq for being on my program today, here on The Week Today. I hope we'll see you next week for another 30-minute debate. Please switch on at 10:30 on Wednesdays and ask us your questions. We look forward to seeing you every week. Thank you very much. Good night and assalamu alaikum.
TF Digital.